LifeSpring family. I am with you here today with just a super special person here in this church. We love her dearly. She oversees our children's ministry. Her name's Deanna Coburn. So could you guys just do me a favor and give her a warm, welcoming hand here?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you guys very much. I wanted to just take a quick minute and invite each of you personally to come to an informational meeting, a gathering. I don't love the word meeting, especially after the past year. So, but I'd love to invite you all to come in. Our nursery ministry is growing and going through some changes, and I want to talk to you about where we are, what's going on, what are your kids and grandkids learning. But I also want to talk to you about our goals and our dreams and what's coming and tell you what our needs are. I don't want to give you a bunch of that tonight. I want you to come spend some time, maybe an hour, hour and a half. Tuesday night, 6:30. I'll try to be early, but by 8 for sure we'll be out, and I'll have some snacks and drinks, and I'd love to see all of you there. That's for, it's family friendly, and youth, adults, all of you. I'd love to have all of you there. Thank you.
All right, so you all better be there, okay? All of you. I will say this, our children's ministry is such an important, vital part of what we do here at LifeSpring, and it's growing. We need help. And so if you feel a little bit of a tug at your heart, that's from God. Be there, okay? For sure, be there. We want you there. But in honor of that, I thought I'd read you guys a little story, okay? So let me read this to you. I found this really good. We were actually doing our sermon club on Monday, and it's a very deep, complicated story. So Dylan gave me this book and said, Mike, maybe this will help you. And I think it will. So let me read it. It says, Samson was blessed with great strength, strong like a superhero, and he'd won many battles. He had also made war against the Philistines, and because of this, the Philistines wanted to hurt Samson. Well, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah. You're so strong, she said. Tell me the secret of your strength. And he did not know that she worked for the Philistines. Delilah had been promised money for Samson's secret. And finally, Samson told Delilah the secret. It's my hair, he said. God makes me strong because I don't cut my hair. And if I were to ever cut it, I would lose all of my strength. And right away, Delilah ran to tell the Philistines. And while Samson slept, a man cut Samson's hair. Delilah was well paid. Well, she got 30 pounds of silver for telling Samson's secret, and Samson did lose his strength. He would wake up chained in a prison cell. And then one day, the Philistines decided to take Samson out of prison. They were having a feast, and they wanted Samson to entertain them. They didn't know that while Samson was in jail, his hair and strength had grown. And the Philistines made fun of Samson. Give me strength one more time, Samson prayed. Show them that you are God. And Samson pushed hard against two pillars, and the building collapsed on the Philistines. The end. Oh, to be a child once again. Yeah, sermon's over. No. Oh, to be a child once again. I got to tell you that we dug into this story on Monday, and that's not really at all what we read. When we tell stories to children, they're going to hear one thing. We have to tell it to them in a way that they can understand, but as we get older, how many times do we still cling to the stories of our childhood, and we think that that's what the stories are about, and it's just inadequate for our adult faith? I can tell you how many times I think back at these stories, and I get these pictures of these people from the Bible, and I think maybe they were perfect. Maybe they had a faith that was just like exactly the way that we are all supposed to have this perfect faith, and then I feel so lacking in my own faith. And maybe you're like that too. You remember these stories from your childhood, and they're just woefully lacking some deeper truths and some deeper things about God that you and I need to hear today. And so today we're going to look at Samson through the eyes of adults, okay? And I got to tell you that there's things in this story that are going to make you scratch your head, and things in the story that are going to make you go, I'm not sure I remembered that from my childhood. And maybe you're aware because you studied this a little bit deeper as you've become an adult, but I want to tell you, I really do believe a lot of us are going to walk away going, wait a minute. Like, that's the Samson that they told me about when I was in Sunday school. That's the Samson, that's the same Samson. Because the reality is he's known for his faith. He's actually found in Hebrews chapter 11, we find his name written in the hall of faith. But his faith was something completely different than what I could possibly imagine it to be known as a person of faith. And like every good superhero, according to this, I love that, like he's calling him a superhero, because that's kind of how I read this story. I read this story, and it comes across like a superhero kind of a story, but like every good superhero, and shout out to my son, they need a good backstory, okay? So we're going to read their backstory of Samson here. And we're going to look at Judges chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. So if you have your Bibles, we're in the book of Judges, and we're going to be starting at chapter 13, and we're going to be looking at pieces of chapter 13, 14, 15, and 16, but we're just going to look at these pieces of it, and we'll still be done in a normal sermon length. Okay, so it's going to be good. Judges chapter 13, verses 1 through 7, starts off by saying, "And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful, and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Then the woman came, and she told her husband, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God, very awesome. And I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name, but he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death." So what we know is that this angel of the Lord came to them, and at first they didn't know this was an angel of the Lord. This actually gets revealed later on in this chapter. But the angel of the Lord comes and says, "You are barren, but I promise you, you are going to have a child, and this child is going to be set apart for a big purpose." What we know is that Samson was born, according to the angel, to begin to deliver God's people from the hand of the Philistines. This actually never gets accomplished fully in Samson's life, but his job is set apart so that he may begin to deliver God's people from the hand of the Philistines. And this is the book of Judges. And Samson's actually the last judge that we find in the book of Judges, and we see the cycle in the book of Judges. And here's the cycle. I'll make it real quick for you. God's people's in a good relationship with God. But then their hearts begin to wander, and they begin to pull away from God. They begin to worship other gods and pursue other things. So then God raises up a people group, a king, that would then overthrow them and rule over them for a period of time. And so as they're under this authoritative relationship with this other people group, with this other kingdom, then their hearts would begin to come back to God. They would be humbled. They'd begin to pray. They'd begin to ask God to deliver them. So then God would raise up a judge who would deliver them from the hand of whoever it was that had overthrown them. You see, because God wanted the hearts of his people. So what God always was. He didn't have a desire for them to have a king. So in the years of the judges, it was just God would raise up somebody to bring them back into a right relationship with them, and then God would be with his people once again. And so what happened is these Philistines had overthrown God's people because their hearts had wandered from God. They did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and for 40 years, an entire generation, the Philistines had ruled over God's people. But then God shows up, and he says, I'm going to set apart this young man named Samson, and he's going to come from a woman who's barren. God tends to do that in Scripture. It's totally miraculous. It has to be from God, this woman who is barren. And so Samson is born, and I want to tell you, he is born with this thing called the Nazarite vow. That's very clear, a Nazarite vow. And I want to talk about that Nazarite vow just for a moment because it's really important in the story of Samson. The Nazarite vow is found in Numbers chapter 6, and you can go back and read that on your own. It's just one chapter, but it goes into great detail and length about what the Nazarite vow is. And what we know about the Nazarite vow is that there's 5 main components of this Nazarite vow, and the first one is that it's a voluntary thing, that you can choose to become a Nazarite if you'd like to. The second thing is that it's a male or female. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. Back in the patriarchal days, sometimes things were set aside just for male, but in the Nazarite vow, it could be a male or female. The next one is that there was a specific time frame, and in this text you find from the womb until he dies. in the womb until he dies. That's the time frame. But for most Nazarites, there's a specific time frame that they set themselves aside, and they're a Nazarite for that period of their life. The next one is that there's requirements or restrictions that are involved in being a Nazarite. And we're going to look at those here in a minute. And then the last one is that there's a sacrifice or offering that happens at its conclusion, which comes important later on. So just remember that last one as well. So there's 5 main components, and those are the baseline, the minimum requirements of being a Nazarite. And so when his mom and dad heard that he was going to be a Nazarite from birth, there's a few unique things about that. There's only 2 other people that we know that were Nazarites from birth, okay? And that's Samuel and that's John the Baptist. And these guys were set aside from birth just like Samson set aside from birth. Here's the requirements that he had to live out all the days of his life as a Nazarite. The requirements are these. We find from Numbers chapter 6, verses 3 and 4, that no alcohol or grapes, that he cannot drink any alcohol or any kind of grapes, any seeds from the grapes or anything like that. No raisins, no dried grapes, anything. The next one is that no razor shall touch his head, so his hair is going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow all the days of his life. And then the last one is that he cannot go near a dead body. And you look at Numbers chapter 6, it can be a little confusing because it looks very clearly like it's talking about human bodies, human corpses. But yet we're going to read this story, and we're not sure if there's a debate going on as to what actually happens with Samson. And so we're going to look at that story here, but remember that don't go near a dead body. And the word Nazarite comes from the Hebrew word nazir, which literally means separated or consecrated. He's literally being set apart, separated, or consecrated for a specific purpose, and God's the one who ordained this. So remember, it's not voluntary on his part. He's actually set aside from his birth that he will be a Nazarite. He didn't have a choice in the matter. So I'm asking for us to look at the story of Samson through a lens of truth, of just understanding the background and the backstory of where he comes from, but also with some empathy, because what we're going to find from Samson is a lot of lacking of what we would call faith. We look at that and go, well, what happened to Samson? Like he went off the rails. And the truth is, I think he probably did. And so we're going to talk about that. And I think that for many of us, when we look at our childhood stories of Samson, and we just stay there, and we don't realize that he was a man with a lot of flaws. He was a man who was born with a silver spoon in his hand, actually. And you might know people like that. Maybe you can relate. You're born with things that other people aren't born with, and you have an opportunity other people may not have. And in his case, he has this strength that other people didn't have, and he's had that set aside by God from birth, and he never asked for it. It was just given to him. Just like that kid who raises up in a Christian home, lives their whole life in a Christian home. That's all they've ever known. And there's a side of them as they grow up, they reach this point where they're like, I've got to find out if this is true in my own life. And there's this thing called rebellion that happens. Anyone relate to that? So here's what happens in Samson's life. He's supposed to live out this it's the Nazarite vow, right? Nazarite, not Nazarene. Nazarite vow his whole life. Judges chapter 14, verses 5 and 6, we come to this story of him growing up. So now he's grown up, and he sees this young woman, and he thinks she's beautiful. One problem, right? She's from Timnah, and she happens to be a Philistine. Pretty big problem. And actually, Dad says, what are you doing? You're out of your mind. He goes, I want her for my wife. Go and get her and take her and let her be my wife. And listen, his dad's like, listen, I counsel against this, son. And literally, when you read the text, he's like, I really don't care what you think, Dad. Go and get her. I want her anyway. Okay? So then the Bible goes on to say that God was going to use this to bring him to infiltrate the Philistines, to bring him into this relationship with the Philistines. So now he's getting ready to marry this woman. And he goes down to Timnah with his parents. And then there's this story I want to read with you as he's heading down to Timnah. He's an adult. He's full grown. He's got this long flowing locks. He's strong as can be, okay? And the Bible says, then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came toward him, roaring. And then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces, my favorite line in all the Scripture, you ready? As one tears a young goat. We all know what that's like, right? But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. The reality is he knew that he did something bad. So he killed this young lion. We don't know exactly why, but he's deceptive about it. Not only is he deceptive here, but it gets a little bit worse. So then actually on his way back, he sees the dead carcass of the lion, and there's a bee's nest inside that dead carcass, and he reaches in, and he grabs the honey, and he eats the honey, and he takes some honey back to his mom and his dad, and he's like, here, eat this honey. It's almost like there's this weird satisfaction he's getting out of this honey is the way that the text is written, and he gives it to his parents, and they eat it, but he doesn't tell them that it comes from the carcass of this dead lion. You see, Samson is hiding some truth. That's one of your fill in the blanks here, is that Samson was deceptive for a reason. Now, I do think that there's a strong case to be made that he broke his Nazirite vow, and he knew he broke his Nazirite vow. It was an unclean thing for him to do, and he did it anyway, but he was like braggadocious about this. It gets worse. So here's what he does. He actually throws this festival or this party, as was custom in the day for a young man to do when he's getting ready to get married. He threw this party, and these 30 companions come that are part of his wife's hometown, and they show up, and he engages with them. They're laughing. They're being merry, and he goes, I got a riddle for you. Kind of reminds me like a Rumpelstiltskin kind of a thing that happens here. So he has this riddle, and he goes, if you can guess this riddle, I will give you 30 linens and 30 changes of clothes. And he says, but if you can guess the riddle, but if you can't guess the riddle, then you're going to give me 30 linens and 30 changes of clothes. So they're like, game on. So he tells the riddle, and the answer to the riddle literally has to do with the lion and the honey. They have no clue. But it's almost as if he's just like, I can't hide it. I gotta brag about this. I've got to find a way to include this in this riddle. And so, but he's a man of honor, right? So he's going to be honest about the riddle. So this wife of his then, that's their in. They can't figure out the answer to this riddle. They have 7 days to figure out the answer to this riddle. They can't figure this out. And so for 6 days, they're mulling it over. They're trying to find an answer. They go to his wife, and they go, come on, you're from our hometown. You're one of us. Be loyal. Be honorable. Go and find the answer to this riddle so we don't have to pay him 30 linens and 30 changes of clothes. And so that's what happens, right? So she comes to him, and she goes, if you love me, Samson, if you love me, you'll tell me the answer to, don't you love me? And then he goes, okay, fine. The answer is, like, what is stronger than a lion? What is sweeter than honey? No one could have known the answer to this riddle, but he tells it to her. And so these 30 guys come back to Samson on the 7th day. This is the final hour, and they go, we know the answer to the riddle, Samson. What is stronger than a lion? What's sweeter than honey? Then he goes, wonder how you found out the answer to that one. And then he says, how dare you plow my field with my own heifer? How dare you come in and take my wife and get the answer from her? I'll pay you what you deserve. And he goes back and he kills 30 Philistines, and he gives them the 30 linens and the 30 changes of clothes from their own blood. You're going to come into my house and find the answer. I'm going to come into your house and take what is rightfully mine. This is Samson, right? This is Samson. This is like a crazy, crazy story. And it gets kind of crazier, right? Because what happens then is he comes back and he says, hey, this woman, I don't want her anymore. I'm done with this woman. This woman is nothing but trouble. And so he brings her home and he says, hey, you can have her back. And so she's given essentially to his best man. And he's like, yeah, that's what I thought, okay? His arrogance, his pride, he has this issue with women we find throughout the story of Samson, repeatedly. So I want to read that to you so that you know I'm telling the truth. Judges chapter 14, verses 19 and 20 says this, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon. He struck down 30 men of the town, and he took their spoil and gave the garments to those that he told the riddle to. And in hot anger, he went back to his father's house. And Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Wow. Samson is something else, man. So if he didn't break the vow when he reached in and he took the honey out of the dead carcass of the lion, well, now he's killed 30 people with his own hands, 30 Philistines, and they are angry. So then he comes back after some time. He comes back looking for his wife, and what does he bring? A young goat. Why? We don't know. I'm not positive, other than there's an obsession with young goats here in this text. Okay, so he brings this young goat because he wants to get back together with his wife. He wants to make amends with her, and nothing says amends like offering a young goat. And here's what happens. The father-in-law says, I thought you utterly hated my daughter. Like, you made it clear you hated her. Now you're going to come back as if she's still yours? Well, she's with your best man. She's with your best friend. And Samson loses his ever-loving mind. He is not happy about this. And so he says, the Philistines deserve everything they get. And then he gets 300 foxes and he ties their tails together and he puts torches between their tails and he sends them through the fields of the Philistines, ends up lighting their fields on fire. And the Philistines are not happy about that move. And they come back demanding Samson's head. Give us Samson. Give us Samson. We want Samson. So here's what happens. His own people come and they say, hey, they're demanding your head. We have to turn you over to the hands of the Philistines. And he said, promise me you won't lay a finger on me. We promise you, we won't lay a finger on you. But we can't deal with this. They're coming after us because of you. We have to turn you over to them. So he says, okay, fine, I'll go. So he willingly goes. And we're going to pick up from the text in Judges chapter 15, verses 14 through 17. And it says, and when he came to Lehi, this is where the Philistines lived, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. And then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that had caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands, and he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. This guy's a bad dude, man. And he put his hand on, and he took his hand and he took it, and with it he struck 1,000 Philistines, 1,000 men he killed. And the text goes on to say, and Samson said in a bragging way, he says, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey have I struck down 1,000 men. And as soon as he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramath Lehi, which means hill of the donkey, or the jawbone, hill of the jawbone. So he took this jawbone, killed 1,000 Philistines. And for those of you who are like, that sounds like a very inadequate weapon, I thought the same thing. So I did a little search, and I found out that a jawbone of a donkey is 4 times stronger than steel. So let's put that one to rest for a minute. I was pretty impressed when I heard that one. 4 times stronger than steel is a jawbone of a donkey. So maybe it wasn't as inadequate as I once thought. Here's what we know. No matter how you slice it, Samson broke his Nazirite vow. He had 1,000 dead corpses, 1,000 dead bodies all around him. And this imagery we get is that he's got nothing left. He's absolutely thirsty. He's taken every ounce of energy that he has that the Lord gave him in that moment. And he's just like, God, are you going to let me die with that? And God's like, no, I'll give you some water. And then he lives. And then the Bible lends us to believe that for the next 20 years, he's in charge, and he's now with God's people. And the Philistines are still in reign. They're still in control. But they don't want to mess with Samson. They're like, we've learned our lesson. We don't want to mess with him. But we do want to find something out. We want to find out what makes him strong. And then the text says that there's this woman of ill repute that then Samson sees. And he goes down and he decides that he wants to be her friend. And so he meets with her and they spend time together. And the Philistines, this is what happens. The Philistines go, Samson's in town, and now we know how to get to him. Hey, Delilah, come over here. Delilah, you need to get close to Samson, and you need to find out what makes him so strong. And so this woman named Delilah comes up, and then she enters into this relationship with Samson because we know that Samson has an issue with women. And so what happens is Delilah shows up, and she's in this picture, and she's in this situation, and she says, what makes you so strong, Samson? And then he's like, well, I don't know that I want to tell. What makes you so strong? Don't you love me, Samson? He's like, I heard that once before. I'm not falling for that. Okay, here's what makes me strong. And he lies to her. And then she goes back and she tells the Philistines, and they come back, and then they do what he initially says, and then he's like, wait a minute, I just told you this, and then now they're responding with this? And she's like, yeah, but you lied to me. How dare you lie to me, Samson? How dare you? They call it gaslighting today. Like, how dare you lie to me, Samson? And then all of a sudden, like they're in this situation. Another thing happens. Hey, tell me where you get your strength from, Samson. And he's like, well, here's where I get my strength. Turns out that's a lie too. And the Philistines come and they do what he says will make him lose his strength. And he's not catching the hint that she keeps feeding the Philistines. So she says, you're such a mean person. Don't you love me, Samson? Don't you love me? Where do you get your strength? And then we find this passage from Judges chapter 16, verses 16 and 17. It says, when she pressed him hard with her words day after day and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all of his heart, and he said to her, a razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. And if my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and like any other man. If my hair is shaved, I will become weak. You see, this is my Nazirite vow. This is representative of my Nazirite vow. I've never touched my hair. Now, Samson knows where his strength comes from. He knows it comes from the Lord. He knows he's been set aside. And he tells this woman, Delilah, this woman that he loves, this woman that he needs in his life. And he tells her. And they come and they cut his hair. And he loses his strength. Now, I'm going to argue today that his weakness wasn't his hair. His weakness was something else entirely. You see, he didn't have a focus on his Nazirite vow. It was given to him from birth, but that wasn't something he asked upon himself. As I study this text, it's almost as if he's just like, oh, great, my Nazirite vow. And he goes about his life, and he's not focused on being set aside for God. As a matter of fact, he's focused on other things. He's focused on lying. He's focused on being deceptive. He's focused on women. He's focused on things he doesn't need to be focused on. You see, God set him aside for a purpose, and he completely denied it to a point where I believe God said, fine, let's take this Nazirite vow away from you. Numbers chapter 6 tells us this. It says, and the Nazirite shall shave his consecrated head at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and shall take the hair from his consecrated head and put it on the fire that is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. Numbers 6:18. That's what happens at the end of your Nazirite vow. You go through a ceremony and you cut your hair, and it represents that you are no longer a Nazirite set apart for this work. And so he gets his hair cut off. Just like he didn't voluntarily choose to be a Nazirite, he involuntarily had the choice taken from him that his hair would be cut, and now his Nazirite vow at that moment was also taken back. He lost his strength. He no longer was set apart for God, and the Philistines subdued him, and they gouged his eyeballs out and became their slave. And then the Bible has this one really interesting thing at the end of that chapter, and it says this, and his hair began to grow back. And then the text tells us that there's this party that happens with the Philistines, that he's their slave, and there's this party. But at this point, Samson's relegated to being a sideshow. He's relegated to just entertaining them. This blind guy who's super strong. And so the Philistines said, hey, bring out Samson. Bring out that strong man and let him entertain us. And so Samson comes out in front of 3,000 Philistines, and the text says these are all the who's who of the Philistines. These are all the rulers. These are all the people that gather together in one spot, and they're making a spectacle of Samson. And I want to read this, verses 23 through 30. And it says this, of Judges chapter 16. Now the lords of the Philistines gathered to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. And they said, our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God has given our enemy into our hand, the ravager of our country, who has killed many of us. And when their hearts were merry, they said, call Samson that he may entertain us. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he entertained them. And they made him stand between the pillars. And Samson said to the young man who held him by the hand, remember, he's blind. He said, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. And now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there. And the roof there was about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson entertained. And Samson called to the Lord, and he said, "Oh Lord, please remember me, and please strengthen me. Only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, and his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he bowed all of his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people who were in it. And so the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those who he had killed during his life. You see, Samson's faith is evidenced in his death. We look at the life of Samson, we can see failure after failure after failure. We can see a man who was not committed to being set apart for God. But in his death, he cried out one more time. Here he was humbled. He was blind. He didn't have his strength anymore, but he still was set apart by God. And as his hair began to grow back, it was indicative of the promise and of why he was set aside in the first place. And he prayed with faith. He remembered that he was a Nazirite and he was set aside for this purpose. And he prayed, and he had the strength to knock down those pillars, and all those Philistines died in one fell swoop. And that is why Samson is remembered for his faith. Listen, I can tell you of lots of people who live their life, and then it's not until the end of their life when they go, "You know what? I think I've ruined it. Man, I'm a failure. I've ruined it. I have not been true to God. I know that he had a plan in my life, and I've just not been true to it." And what we learn from Samson is that it's not over till it's over. It ain't over till it's over. As long as there's breath in my body, I can honor God. This is a new day. Yesterday has gone and passed, but I have today, I have tomorrow, I have whatever time I have left here on earth, and even if it's my dying breath, I will honor and praise God with my life and with my strength. So we find in Samson's life that in his death, he honored God and he lived out his Nazirite vow. And in one fell swoop, he killed more Philistines because he was true to his Nazirite vow. Maybe for the first time in his life, he was true to his Nazirite vow. And I just want to ask, who here today needs to hear that word? Who here today needs to be reminded that it's totally okay if today you say, "I'm going to be true to my vow to God," because we may not be Nazirites in that sense, but we're set apart just like Nazirites were set apart. You see, the truth is, the Bible teaches us repeatedly over and over and over that as Christians, we are set apart for the work of God. And I want to read a couple scriptures with you as we wrap up here. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness and into the marvelous light." You and I are his treasured possession of all things in all the universe. You and I have been bought for a price, and he has set us aside to be a holy people, a royal priesthood, so that we could declare his excellencies. That is what the purpose of life is about, is to declare the excellencies of the one who came and died on the cross for our sins, of the Father who came up with the plan to redeem you and to redeem me back to him. We are set apart for that purpose. Sometimes we forget that. And maybe it's because we were born into a Christian home. We've been Christians our whole lives. We don't know any different. You remember what it was like when you first became a Christian? You very first became a Christian? And you just knew, man, I'm a child of God. I'm saved. And I want to tell everyone I meet about the goodness of God. I think sometimes we start to take for granted the idea that we've been set apart, we've been sanctified, we've been consecrated for a purpose, for a reason. I want to read a couple more passages as we finish up here. And this is from the book of Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, and then Romans chapter 6 after that. It says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. We are set apart. We're set apart to offer our bodies as living sacrifices to God. We get to do that because of His goodness. And then when we do that, we will know His will, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. If we're struggling and we feel like, man, we can't see God, or we can't understand what God's doing in our life, we can't see His will or His purpose, well, maybe it's time that we just say, God, I'm going to offer my body as a living sacrifice. I'm yours. God, use me however you want to. You can't really fully know what it's like to be used by God until you say, God, I'm yours fully, use me. That's exactly what Samson did. Samson said, I'm yours fully, use me. Until then, he might have known that God had a plan in his life, but he had one foot in and one foot out. It wasn't until he was fully in when he did exactly what God called him to do, which was to begin to rescue God's people from the hand of the Philistines. Romans chapter 6 says this. It says, we know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. For one who has died has been set free from sin. And then just a few verses later says, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body to make you obey its passions. Do not present your members to sin as instruments for unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and your members to God as instruments for righteousness. For sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law, but under grace. God's grace compels us, Christians. It's not about getting it right. We are not under law. We are under grace. But because we are under grace, we set ourselves apart, and we do whatever we can to live away from sin, to live apart from sin, not because we have to. We have to because of what Jesus did for us on the cross. We're compelled to, but it's a compulsion that's not legalistic. It's not because the law demands it. It's because there's a God who loves us that much, who would freely give us that much, that we will willingly set ourselves aside for the gospel. You want to know radical faith. You want to live a radical faith. You want faith in your life. I believe radical faith is living set apart for the purpose of God. I believe that. I believe when we set ourselves aside and we say, I'm not living for the patterns of this world, I'm not living in my sin, I'm not living in my flesh, I'm living for a God who has a plan for my life, and He wants to use me to declare His excellencies. I believe when we do that and we decide we're going to repent and leave our sin, we're going to get baptized in the waters of baptism, we're going to pursue Him with our whole life and set ourselves apart for Him, I believe we will understand what it means that God has a plan for your life and my life, and that's my prayer, LifeSpring. My prayer is the reality is I know that Samson had a hard time at life, and I know that he chose to abandon and to walk away from his Nazirite vow. He didn't fully embrace it. I think he was born with this silver spoon in his hand, and maybe you too sometimes struggle in your own faith. Maybe your eyes cast to the left, your eyes cast to the right, but you can't keep it fixed on the cross. My prayer, LifeSpring, is that we have the kind of faith that says, Jesus, I'm all yours. Because you're all mine, I'm all yours. That's my prayer. I want to pray as we wrap up here and as we go into communion. But before we do that, I just want to talk, man. Next week we're having a baptism here. I think that's so cool. It's amazing that we're going to have a baptism. And we've got other people who are saying, I want to get baptized. We might have more baptisms. We actually got our baptistry in here this past week. So we do have a baptistry. We're going to be using that for the first time next week. So if you're interested, info@mylifespringchurch.org. Come see one of us ministers. We'd love to get you set up and get you baptized this next week. We love you guys, LifeSpring. Let's have communion, and let's honor God in our taking of communion. Father God, we thank you. We thank you for the cross. We thank you for setting us apart, for choosing us, God. And God, it's weird sometimes to think that you chose us, but you did. And God, I believe that we're not here by accident, not just at LifeSpring, but where we're at in our life, but it's because you intentionally decided we were worth it, that we are your chosen people, that we are your treasured possession. And so, Father, I just ask your blessing. As we do the best we can, we're going to fail, but help us to keep our eyes fixed on the cross. Help us to keep our faith focused in the right direction, God. And I pray that you strip away the things from us that don't belong. And as we come to communion, God, I just pray that we can remember one more time the sacrifice you gave us willingly on the cross. You are good. And help us to remember your goodness, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.